thanks Oliver for saving us some time, 4 minutes. More time for Julian. Actually, not everyone gets 20 minutes, but more time for discussing afterwards. Julian is here joining us, and I'm really looking forward for his chat, his talk, especially because Fractal, his company is not his first one. You're a serial entrepreneur. Actually, your first company was founded when you were 22. Correct? Yep. 22, 24? Yeah, 22. And you founded a company with 3D printing and as well building up this company which is doing as well as jewelry and finishing up 3D prints. And I'm actually really amazed by that because I think until this day we're looking for a good use case for 3D printing, and I'm really looking forward to how you this time adopt technology and as well as such a cutting edge technology. And I'm really looking forward to your chat. Thanks.
So I'm actually here not to talk about 3D printing or jewelry. Don't ask me how I got into that rabbit hole. I'm here to talk about the mechanics of the token launch, and the reason why is because actually I've always been in touch with how to finance companies and how to have alternatives in financing these companies. My goal here is to talk to you about actually how to do it from an entrepreneurial perspective. So I would like you to have an idea, what do I actually have to do step by step to make it work? And then you guys can decide for yourself if you're planning a launch, if you need help or if you don't need help. As Eric said, I ran my own 2 companies before, and I know how hard it is to raise funds. And I think that entrepreneurs should have all the help they can get to start their own company or to fund their own company. What we are doing right now with Fractal is we are providing some of these services. And one example of our software you can see with the Ocean Protocol launch that has just happened, the whitelisting a couple of days ago, quite successfully. But I will draw from these experiences in my talk. It's going to be about what building blocks do we have in the token launch and what actually makes a token launch successful from a really pragmatic point of view. So what is it anyway? I mean, it started as a way to fund open source companies. That was kind of like a funding of last resort because they couldn't get funds anywhere else. It's open and transparent. It's an upfront payment for future consumption, and that's important. It's not by the protocol, but through the protocol. And I think what makes it really interesting, it's a self-enforcing right. It's on a code as law basis. So when I'm talking about token launch, I actually mean like the whole period before and after, whereas I see like the ICO as this small time frame where you actually release the tokens. So token launches are a lot of work, and it really needs a focused team to get that stuff going. And I was lucky enough to see that with the Ocean team, what you have to do to actually get that up and running and make it successful. So I want to walk you through like all these different steps that they had to do, and as you can see, it's steps from very different verticals. So if you're a marketing expert, it's rather unlikely that you're also the tech expert, that you're also the legal expert. So you actually have to get a lot of people involved, and just understanding and trying to put like everything in order takes quite a lot of skills. So obviously the blockchain design is something where I feel that the core team has to really dig in there and really make that work themselves. I mean, there are service providers out there, but creating your basic technical setup, deciding what's the characteristics of the token, having the incentive scheme, deciding is it going to be an ERC20 token, is it going to be a native token, writing the white paper. Of course, you guys, you need help with that, but you need to be the driving force. You can't have anyone else come up with this concept. So the legal and tax setup is where it gets mostly complicated for entrepreneurs, because you need lawyers, you need tax advisors, you need to ask yourself, where do I want my entity to be based in what jurisdictions? And there are a couple of things to consider here. I mean, first of all, is it possible in the jurisdiction where I want that launch to happen? Are there regulatory hurdles that are just too big to tackle? What taxes do I pay? What transaction fees do I have, for example, to flying into this jurisdiction, to have a professional board, etc., etc. So this is something where you definitely will need a lawyer to make sure that this is all set up in the right way. You also need lawyers for your legal documents, the safety stuff, the TNC, data privacy statements. However, this is something where asking fellow entrepreneurs that have already done so is highly advisable, because you don't have to reinvent the whole setup yourself. If you just draw on something that others have been doing already, it might save you a lot of time and cost. So then there's the token launch and the economics of the token launch. So first up, you have to decide what's my total token supply? What's my distribution? How many funding events do I have? Do I have like a pre-launch? Do I skip the pre-launch, go straight to the ICO? Do I even have like maybe a seed for very early supporters and investors? Do I just give out tokens to the community to kind of spread the word? You have very different styles of selling off your tokens, like a Dutch auction, Gnosis being one of the most famous ones that did that. Having just a fixed price, or something that's coming up with the Ocean Launch, a rising tide mechanism, where you optimize to get as many people as possible into your token launch. That has very different pros and cons. Do you want to optimize for highest price? Do you want to optimize for largest community? That's something that you have to ask yourself. You need a business white paper. You need some kind of onboarding interface. The times where you just have a smart contract are over. Some would say unfortunately, some like it. You need to be able to talk to your customers to get the information in. And you also have to find exchanges to get your token traded once it's launched. So the most exciting part of all, regulations and whitelisting. This is where entrepreneurs sometimes, that I talk to, sometimes have a pretty impressive knowledge about that. And I'm always asking myself, hey, aren't those guys supposed to be the tech expert? And now they just spent the last 4 months becoming legal experts and regulatory experts. And I think that this is something that you as an entrepreneur trying to launch a token shouldn't be experts in, and this is something that's a one-time event. You're probably very likely not going to do it second time, so yeah, I would externalize it. If you don't want to do that, here's the list of what you need to take a look at. The KYC process, for example, and take into account, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, you know the drill. You need to do a KYC process, usually not by law, but by merit of wanting to have a bank and merit of wanting to have an exchange that lists your coin or your token. So you want to be compliant with what they need for your token, not necessarily because it's required by law. But you need to take a look at the regulation, capital market regulation, data privacy. There are some strange regulations that come into place. For example, e-commerce regulation in Europe. Why should I use that? But if you're selling like kind of like vouchers online, then this is e-commerce and you need to comply with that. you really want to make sure that there is no terrorist financing or money laundering going on. That's something that you need to take care of. You need to see that you know the identity and the address, and you might have to run accredited or qualified investor checks. For example, if your token qualifies as a security in the US, then this might be a way to solve that. If you are working with institutionals, you need to know who's the beneficial owner. And finally, you need to have people that kind of check on these. And with the very international token launch, you have non-Latin scripts that documents that are delivered. Like we had a lot of Vietnamese and Thai documents, or Russian, Japanese, South Korean documents. So you need to staff your KYC team with also people that are able to understand that. So quickly touching on the security measures, you need to make sure that the server is secure. So you might want to consider a white hat hacker that attack your servers. You want to communicate actively to your audience, like when is the launch going to be? What's the URL? What tools can I use to prevent scammers from, trying to fool you? How are you going to communicate, for example, the address if you have a single one? Or where is this address going to be communicated at? And from our experience, this is something that's much more important than like the technical security measures. You want to audit your distribution mechanism. You have to think about wallet security. And also very important is have your employees do security training. Like, please don't click on random links that are sent to you via email, like standard stuff, but it helps to just repeat that to keep everyone safe. You want to have a crisis scenario protocol and something that's nowadays very important, a physical safety protocol. Like, you wouldn't walk around with like $1 million in your pocket, right? So you might consider leaving your hardware wallet at home if it has this sum on it. Well, now we're getting to marketing, and that's a whole different thing here, right? So building the community is something that's actually very important, and it's a community that's active worldwide. So you have to create and engage with these communities, mostly online, but also offline, to organize meetups, to involve people, to get feedback, and that's very helpful. And it's not only helpful for your product itself, but also helpful for the kind of responses that you get if you involve people. And it's also a pretty great way to recruit and to recruit new personnel, and to also engage people into your launch. So this is the most intense part. It's refining the mission, refining the story, and then finally, in the final weeks and months before the launch, actually communicating your message spot on. So creating a PR strategy, speaking at conferences, and actually doing a global roadshow. So those were just like guiding you through the main points of the token launch, and I hope that helped to kind of like get an idea. What I want to do is also just pick on what I find could be pragmatic things, pragmatic points that I would like to hint you to. And I want to start with the contributors, because I've done research in equity crowdfunding, and one point that struck me is that it's similar in some points. For example, who's actually investing, and they are very different from the motive of why they invest. Some would say, hey, it's a great way to get returns. So those are your financial investors. You have some that would say, hey, this is what I've been waiting for. I actually want to use this product. So for them, it's more like an e-commerce store. You know, they want to buy it, they want to use it, they want to work with that. And some say, hey, it's a great open source project that I want to support. And it's up to you to cater the message, to ask yourself, who do I actually want to attract? Like, who do I want in my future community? Because it's not like you just raise funds and that's it. I mean, you actually have to deliver, and having a community here makes it a lot easier to do so. Also keep in mind, it's a worldwide thing, so you might have to switch your message depending on who you talk to. That's also something that struck me. As you can see, 40% of the funds are allocated in 10% of the time. And this is not an average ICO fund allocation, but this is your average crowdfunding allocation. Back in the days, like, it's data taken from Seed Match, I think from 2011 to 2014 or so, the average. And what we see here is like research in the crowdfunding market that can be really interesting here, because the mechanism is just the same. Like, you see a lot of launches being sold out really fast. So what we can see from this slide is actually the launch is done, or the launch is, it's decided before it has even started. So if you're not sure if your launch is going to be a success, then it might make sense to prepare a little bit more beforehand, because it's the enthusiasm that you build up in the first, in the month before, not during the campaign. That's a very important point. I see token launches. Tokens are mostly sometimes a lot different. I mean, it depends on how you structure them. But if you have a utility token, you want to optimize for usage. You don't need to capture all the value yourself. And that's something that you can also communicate to your community, and why you need this community if you have a utility token. And Chris Bernisk has done a pretty great job to come up with the model how to evaluate that and be on this case and try to understand, like, try to argue the case, why is your token worth that much? This is the contribution, or the whitelisting contribution of the 20,000 whitelistings that we saw for Ocean Protocol. So as you can see here, this is a true international phenomenon. This is not just make-believe saying, well, we are international investors, and then it comes out that proximity is still like the best indicator for where you invest. No, this is also not like a 80-20 game. This is actually, we had contributors from 166 countries. And for me personally, that was just very interesting and also rewarding, because they have really try to get as many people in and be as open as they can. And I think that plays out well to actually get an audience, get a community that you can count on. So those are my 8 insights for a successful token launch. I would advise you begin with building a community, not all this legal stuff. Try to get people enthusiastic about your product. Understand the different investor and be on message. Don't be the regulatory expert, just hire someone for that. Take standard modules. All the individualization will be very, very expensive. I think a standard setup mostly does the trick. Set a max ticket for your pre-launch, because you get your community involved, and I think that's a good idea. Spend actually time building your international community. Do an international roadshow, show up in Asia, show up in South America, make sure to get people involved. Have a kick-ass Telegram team. If you don't, they're gonna stomp all over you. And make sure to just have your launch, have your community enthusiastic before you actually launch, and then good luck.
Thank you. Great. So I'd like to ask Oliver, Hansen, Sebastian, Alex, and of course Julian to join on the stage. We don't use the microphone for the panel because we only have one in this room.
Yes, sorry.